Good evening, everyone.
Kabataraf, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Okay, we're going to the next chapter, which is Reish. So it says over here in the Torah, שלושה שאכלו כאחד, אחד מפסיק לשניים, ואין שניים מפסיקים לאחד, right? So this is an important rule to remember, that if you have three people eating together, and so they want to, some of them want to leave, right? One or two wants to leave. So because of that, they want to do the zimun, and then vacate, right? But the thing is, the others they want to stay there, and eat more or whatever, right? Sit there more. So if that's the case, comes and tells you, right, that if you have one who wants to leave, um, or you have two who wants to leave. So if you have two that want to leave and one wants to stay, so they're allowed to stop, the meal, and they tell him, let's do zimun. And if you want to continue eating after, no problem, right? We'll just do zimun, and right, we'll move, we'll get out of here, and you continue. So they have the right to do that, to stop him, to do zimun. But if there's one person who wants to leave and two want to stay, so then, right, he doesn't have the right to stop them for zimun, since he's the minority there. That's what he's saying over here. So he brings Rashi to explain it, right? Perish Rashi says, Derech Eretzu, right? It's like, just proper manners. That's what it is. שיהיה אחד מפסיק לסעודתו, לשניים. The proper manners is, right, that we go according to the majority. So if two want to go, right, so one should, listen to them, right, and accommodate them, since they want to leave. עד שיזמנו, עד הזן, ואינו ברכת המזון, וחוזר וגומר סעודתו. So what happens, right? They're going to do zimun, and they're going to do the first blessing of Birkat Hamazon, and then he'll continue, right, eating his meal afterwards, the guy who wants to stay. Aval Shnai, but if you have two people, as we said, right, and them speak le'echad, one shouldn't stop two people, it's not proper. ואם לא, שירצו לעשות לו לפנים משורת הדין. Unless they want to be nice to him, and accommodate him, that's fine, no problem with that. It's just that, when you're getting down to the real law, the bottom line, right, is if you're allowed to, you're not allowed to. So, that's one thing. The law is one thing. But if you want to be kind to your friend, and stop for him until he does zimun and leaves, fine with that, no problem. Okay, great. So let's move on a little bit. והרי כתב שאחד חייב להפסיק לשניים. So Re says, right, two has to one has to stop for two, as we said. והרעב"ד כתב לכאורה משמע שאם לא היה פוסק, לא היו מזמנים אליו. So says the Ravad, if he wouldn't stop, they wouldn't do zimun with him. But lo, it's not true, he says, אלא הם מזמנים עליו. They do zimun on him, ואף על פי שדעתו לאכול, even though he wants to eat more, אלא שהוא צריך לפסוק כדי שיצא מהם ידך זימון. He just has to stop until they do zimun. That's the whole point. שכבר נתחייב בו, because he's already obligated, to do zimun. So therefore, he's got to accommodate them in a case like that. Okay, great. So that's the tour. So we'll take a look at the Bet Yosef. So he brings a source for this halacha. Where is it? Be'esh Perek Shlosha She'achlu, same place, right? Mem He Amud Bet in Brachot. And Mash Katav Rabbeinu B'Shem Rashi, that which Rabbeinu taught, named Rashi, Ad Sheizamenu Ad Hazan, until they do zimun, and then even the first blessing, Dainu Birkat Zimun, which is the blessing of the zimun. So he says we're going to explain that, right? Exactly where they have to stop and all that. Okay, and that which he says that that he then he continues his meal, right, and finishes afterwards, no problem. Biaru Rabbeinu b'samuch, right? So that is going to be explained, right? The tour a little bit later. Okay. So then he says, Mash katav b'shem Rabbeinu Yonah. That what you know, Rabbeinu Yonah. Gam harosh katav debarab. The Rosh also says this. Sham v'lo ichriya ben perush Rashi perusho. He didn't really paskin between Rashi and his perush. Rashba katav kedivi Rabbeinu Yonah. Rashba paskins like Rabbeinu Yonah. V'kemo shkiachtob b'samuch. Like we're gonna write later on a little bit. Okay, so that's that. Umash katav Rabbeinu b'shem Ravad. That was the tour said named Ravad. Gam harosh katav sham b'divarav. The Rosh also writes his words there. He writes the Rashba like this: Echad mafsik l'shnayim. One stops for two. Shnayim en mafsikim le'echad. But two don't stop for one, as we said. It seems like this is the way you explain it. Echad mafsik al kochol shnayim. That means that one has to stop, right? He's obligated to do so for two people. And he has to answer with them the zimun. Even if he doesn't want to stop, and they're doing zimun on him, so he says, right, that basically even if he doesn't answer this guy, the job is still done either way. The zimun has been accomplished either way. Okay. As long as he's there, that's the only thing, right? It's the only condition you have. But two don't need to stop for one, as we said. They're not obligated, that's what it means. So therefore, the obligation of zimun doesn't take effect unless they agree to stop, to bless. If they don't want to stop, it's not worth anything, right? It's no zimun there. You can't do it that way. Therefore, he says, if they didn't want to stop, he also is not allowed to bless, to do that, to force them, and then to go right leave. Until the point where the two people finish, he's going to do zimun with them. He has already become obligated in zimun, he says. Vehi achi barech belo zimun. So then how is he going to bless without zimun? אבל ראיתי לרבי גאון, but he says, I saw this rabbi שכתב, אם ביקש אחד מהם לצאת, he says that if one of them um, needed to leave, אין השניים מפסיקים לעשותתן. So two people cannot stop for him, right? They don't have to. ומזמנינן עמו, and they do zimun with him, אלא הוא מברך לעצמו. Rather, what happens is that he blesses by himself, בלא זימון, without זימון, ויוצא בהם גומרים סעודתן. So then he leaves, right, and they finish their סעודה. וצריכה עיונה על כן הסעודה. So it needs some investigation, he says, right, this whole concept here. ולעניות דעתי נראה שהגאון לא איירה אלא שהדבר נחוץ לו לצאת. So it says with Yosef, right, that it seems to me that he's talking about a case where that it's like really, he has a big need to go out. So it's not possible to stay around. But if it's possible to stay around, even according to the Gaon, he's not allowed to bless, and to go out. The shuk until the two people will finish. And he will do zimun with them. Okay. So that's the end of Aleph. Let's see Shulchan Aruch here. Okay, so says Shulchan Aruch, שלושה שאכלו כאחד, right? You have three people ate together, אחד מפסיק על כוחו, בשניים. So, right, if two want to leave, so that third guy has to stop for them and, do the zimun with them first. The onei mahem birkat zimun. So they'll answer zimun together. אפילו לא רצה להפסיק, even if he doesn't want to stop. מזמין לה בין עונה, בין אשן עונה. They can still do zimun, like kind of force it on him, They can force him. So they can't really force him to answer, So what they do is they just like say it, And he just sits there like a log. Whatever. Okay. Kosher umed sham. As long as he's standing there, right? That works. אבל שניים אין חייבים להפסיק לאחד. But two people don't need to stop for one, right? ולכך אין חיוב זימון חל עד שיתרצו להפסיק. Therefore, the obligation of zimun doesn't really come up unless they agree to stop. Those two. To bless and if they don't want to stop, right, and they just like did zimun by himself, whatever. That's nothing, right? Worthless. If he doesn't want to stop, if they didn't want to stop, I'm sorry. He's not allowed to bless and just leave, he can't do that. Until they finish those two, right? He's going to do it together with them, zimun. That's the only option he has, basically. So he says he's already obligated to zimun, so therefore, how is he going to just go and bless without zimun? Not Not possible. Okay, wow. So I guess we'll go to the next one. Yeah. So it says over here, the tour, umafsik ad saimu birkat hazan. So as we said, right, he has to stop until they finished zan, which is the first blessing. The Kasinon Beresh Perek Shlosha Shechluk. It says there in the Gemara, Mem Bava Mud Aleph, Ad Sheichan Birkat Zimun. When does Zimun right finish? Till where does it go? Rav Nachman Amar Ad Shenebarech until the word Nebarech. Rav Sheshet Amar Ad Azan until Azan. Uh, right. Okay. So in other words, basically they just have to finish the Zimun. They don't have to go into the Birkat Hamazon. That's what he's saying. And then he goes on, "Umashe piresh Rabbeinu bezehu medivri Arosh." And now what Rabbeinu said, right, is from the Rosh. V'lo kedivri Rashi, not like Rashi. The Hilu Rashi, because according to Rashi, piresh עד היכן ברכת המזימון מצליחים להיות שלושה כשהם בשניים לא יאמרוה. הרב ששת אמר עד ברכת הזן, גם היא ברכת הזימון, והקשו עליו התוספות. So according to Rashi, it seems like we're going into until the first blessing, ברכת המזון. So Tosfot asked about that on Rashi, Aruch the Kaimalan, and also the Rosh, that they said the Kerav Sheshet. We hold like Rav Sheshet that Israel when it comes to prohibitions. So according to him, right, the individual doesn't say that. So if that's the case, how are we accustomed, right, to do as individuals the first blessing, Hazan? There's also another question they asked. Other questions, he says. So therefore they explained, right? Birkat Zimun. They said, until where does Zimun go? The blessing of Zimun. Ad le'el kai. That's going on whatever was above. The Aminan Shlosha she'achlu echad mafsik. That we said, right, that three that ate together, one stops לשניים for two. כלומר, שמפסיק לברך ברכת הזימון. That means that he stops, right, to do the zimun. ואחר כך יחזור ויאכל. And then he's going to go back and eat again. Right? That's the thing. וכמה עד היכן ברכת הזימון. And he says, right, that until where does zimun go? רב נחמן אמר עד נברך, until נברך, which is in the zimun. ואחר כך יתחיל לאכול, and then he's going to start to eat. רב ששת אמר עד הזן. It says it goes until zan. והזן בכלל בתא, and the zan is included, but tamo mishum decheban de nevarech enon brecha ilkach. So he says the reason is because since nevarech is not really a blessing, it's like an invitation to a blessing. Ilkach mistaber she'apsik achilato. So therefore, it makes sense to say they should stop eating bishvil bracha echad. They should stop eating because of one blessing. Kadesh sheyeh nikar shemizmin alav. That it should be recognizable that that we do zimun on him, velo mishum dechashiv, not because it's considered the birkat hazan, birkat zimun, not because birkat hazan is called zimun. Tehakol yachid nami omer hazan, because everybody says hazan, right? That's the first blessing of the birkat hamazon. אלא לעניין זה שיפסיק עד שיברכו ברכה אחת. The only right relevance of this is that you got to stop until they bless one blessing. וכן כתב גם כן רבנו יונה, so it says there, כתב הראש בירושלמי, it says in Rosh in Yerushalmi, כרסינן שלושה שאכלו. It says over there 3 people that ate כאחד, like one group, וביקש אחד מהם ללך, and one of them wanted to leave, כי רב אמרי יברך ברכה ראשונה, like Rav, I'm sorry, I didn't say it right. Not like Rab. Lelech Berav, he wanted to go to the yeshiva. Amre Yivarech Bracha Rishona. So they say, right, let him do the first blessing, Ve'elech lo and go. Ve'ezo hi Bracha Rishona. What's the first blessing? Right? Deve Rab Amre Birkat Zimun. This rabbi says it's the Zimun. Rabbi Zera B'Shem Rabbi Yirmi Amar Hazan. This rabbi says, no, it's Hazan, the first blessing of Birkat Hamazon. את הכל, right, that's how it is. ואפשר לפרשו באחד מפסיק לשניים. So it is possible to explain it that one stops for two, שביקש אחד מהם לצאת, one of them wanted to leave, that's what it means, מפסיק לשניים, he stops for two people, ואחר כך יחזור ויגמור סעודתו, and then he's going to come back and finish his סעודה. וקשה לי, this is hard for me, this thing, לפירוש הזה, according to this explanation, דלא הבלה למימר, then he shouldn't have said, עד היכן ברכת הזימון, until where does זימון go, בסתם כיוון, because דלא כאה, אלא האחד, because since it's going on one, mafsik l'shnayim, that he stops for two, one stops for two, ve'arif piresh ad hechan birkat hazimun. Rif explains like this, where does birkat zimun finish? Klamar she'im achlu shlosha, that means that if 3 people ate, והוצרך אחד מהם לצאת, and one of them need to leave, שיושב עד שיגמרו אותה ברכה, you should sit there until they finish that blessing. Rav Nachman Amar Ad Nevarech. Rav Nachman says until Nevarech. Klamar, mean to say Ad Shamu Baruch She'achalnu Mishalov Tovachaynu. Until they said this right answer of the Zimun. Shazohi Birkat Zimun. That's the Zimun really. Okay. So then he moves on. Rav Sheshet Amar says Rav Sheshet Ad Hazan V'Kaim Alan. He says we stop it until Zan, and we hold Rav Nachman like Rav Nachman. The Amar Ad Nevarech until Nevarech. V'Chen Amar Dabar. That's what people do, right? In other words, we don't paskin like the opinion that says you got to do the first blessing as well. Just Nevarech, and that's it, right? Meaning what? Only the Zimun, not the Birkat Hamazon at all. Because everybody does Birkat Hazan, right, by himself, the first blessing. So we see from there that Hazan is not really part of the Zimun. Okay, that's clear. That's the end of it. Okay, great. Okay, so this goes until the end of the chapter. Oh boy, it's long. Okay. Okay, let's move on. So it says, הראש בפסקיו ברבנו תופס עיקר פירוש ריף. So he says the Rosh and the Rabbeinu, which is the Torah, they paskin like the Rif. דלעניין אם מוצח אחד מהם לצאת, הפליגו. So meaning to say that they're arguing about the case where one of them has to leave. Umina Yalif Rotze Lechol, and from there he learns that the one who wants to eat Shadina Yotze V'Dina Ochel Shavim Hen. That when it comes to right, the rule of going leaving and the one of the one who eats, they're equal. And even though Rif Pasak like Rav Nachman, Lo Chashash Rabbeinu Ledvarav. Nevertheless, the tour. Let me just see who's saying this. This was said by the Rosh, right? Okay. פסק רב ששת, פסק רב ששת באיסורי, when it comes to prohibitions, וכן נראה שהוא דעת התוספות. That's what seems to be also opinion of תוספות, והראש, and also the ראש, לפסוק בהי כרב ששת, to פסק רב ששת, משום דקיים לן להלכת כבטא באיסורי. Because we hold, right, that the halacha is like when it comes to prohibitions. וגם רבנו יונה, also this rabbi, כתב, שכן פסק בהג, right, this rabbi says like that also. מתוך מה שכתבתי בשם התוספות, now what I wrote, the name of the story says Ve'arosh and Torash. The Tama, the Rav Sheshat. What's the reason of Sheshat? The Omar Adasan that he said until Azan, which is the first blessing. Lab Mishum Dechashi Birkat Azan Birkat Zimun. Not because he considered that to be a part of the Zimun. Teha Kol Yachid Dami Omer Azan. Because really every individual also will say Hazan. Ela Linyan Zeh Shiafsik Ad Shivarchu Bercha Echad. Rather, it's regarding this, that he's got to stop until they do one blessing. So you see from there that the Torah should not have written above. He says, Ad she'azminu shizamnu ad azan, and they should do until azan. Dainu birkat zimun. That's the birkat, the blessing of the zimun. Shazeu dat Rashi, because that's according to Rashi. Ukvar dachu and parshim devarav, and the commentaries are already deflected Rashi. Begam Rabbeinu lo ketavam. Also, right, the Rabbeinu, he says the Tur didn't write it. Lifsok halacha kidvarav, to paskin halacha like that. That wasn't his intention. But he says rather what it was is that since the Tur needed to copy over the words of Rashi, right, to bring it over, he didn't want to he didn't want to remove anything from his words. And he relied on that which regarding the witness, I'm sorry, I didn't say it right. One more time. לא ראה לגרוע מדבריו כלום, ושמח על מה שכאן גבי עד אחד. So he relied on that which here, regarding regarding this issue of עד היכן ברכת הזימון, until when does זימון go, לא הזכיר פירושו של רש"י, he didn't explain רש"י, בדעת הרמב"ם נראה שהוא גדת הריף. It seems like the Rambam holds like the riff, שפוסק הלכה כרב נחמן, he passed רב נחמן, שבפרק ב' כתב בסדר ברכת הזימון, כך הוא, because he writes over there in chapter 20, chapter 2, that it seems like that the order of Birkat Hamazon is like that. Rishona Birkat Hazan. First, Hazan Tzakol, right? That's the first blessing. Uperek came in the first parak in Rambam, Katav shekishem shelosha chayvim levarech. Then when there are three people there, they have to bless Zimon. They have to do Zimon. Call them Birkat Hamazon before Birkat Hamazon. Ezoi Birkat Zimon, which is called Zimon Nevarech. That's the Zimon. She'achal mishalo, like that, right? וממילא משמע דאינו נקרא זימון כלל. So he says from there you see that it's not really called זימון at all, אלא נברך, just that part, only that part. not הזן את הכל, that's already ברכת המזון. שאכלנו משלו לבד, וכיוון ששניהם מסכימים לדעת אחד, since they both agree with one opinion, הכי נקטינס, that's how we paskin, he says. Oh, okay, wow. Right, so we go like the Rif and the Rambam, that's what he's saying. Okay, great. Let's move on. So then he says, Peresh Rashi explains, before that, right? Beresh Perek Shlosha Shechlu, in the beginning of this Perek, right, in Brachot, it says over there, Le'echan hu chozer, where does he return to? Rav Zavid Amar Mishmed Abaye, this rabbi said the name of Abaye, chozer lerosh, it goes back to the beginning. Rabbanan Amre le'makom shepasak, and the rabbis say, no, it goes back to the place where he stopped. I think I skipped something here, 1 second. Okay, I'll read that one more time. So, ולאחר משגמור, at least, הוא סעודתו, יתחיל, הוא, בברכת הזן, right? So, yeah, I think I skipped something. So, first of all, right, we concluded that the halacha is like the Rif and the Rosh. That was the conclusion of this part of the Bet Yosef. So, what does that mean, practically speaking? That until where do we read? Right, the zimun, and then a person can go back to his meal, right? In this scenario that we described, until nebarech, right? That's it. And after nebarech, she'achal mishalo, then he can go back to his meal. He doesn't have to. They don't have to do the first blessing, hazan et hakol. Makes sense. So then he goes on to say, the tour, that after he finishes Seudah, Yatchil hu b'Birkat Hazan. Then, right, he's going to do Birkat Hazan et Hakol, the first blessing. So who are we talking about? We're talking about the guy who stayed over, stayed later. He's going to do like this. Then hey the Yatzah Yedei Zimun, because even though he already did Zimun, right, before those two guys left, regarding what he ate, Beresh Perek Shlosha Shechlu. So it says, right, Bet Yosef, this is also in the Gemara there. Where does he go back? Rabbi Zvi Amar Mishmedi Abaye. This rabbi says Chozer lerosh, goes back to the beginning. The rabbis say the makom shepasak, he goes back to the place where he stopped. Halacha is, it says that we go back to the place where you stopped. Rashi, so what does that mean? Rashi explains, Lechan hu chozer, where does he go back? Mishe nitzaref lezimun, whoever combined the zimun, v'amin leel, v'aman leel, we said above, aliba derav sheshat, birkat zimun ad hazan. The birkat zimun goes until zan. לא צריך זה להיות מפסיק אכילתו. So this person needs to stop his eating עד שגמר המברך ברכת הזן, until the blesser finishes the ברכת הזן. וחזר זה שהפסיק לשניים, and now this guy, right, who stopped, and then continued to eat, וגמר סעודתו, להיכן הוא חוזר? Where does he go afterwards? לברך לאחר שיגמור סעודתו, after he finishes his meal. חוזר לראש, he goes back to the beginning, right? What does that mean? Right at the beginning of ברכת המזון. לתחילת הזן, beginning of הזן. שהרי נתחייב בזימון שבתחילה עוקבה שבשלושה. Because he was obligated to do זימון because they had 3 people there. למקום שפסק. He stops wherever he starts wherever they stopped. וברכת הארץ כשער יחיד. So he says, right, that we're talking about the second blessing, of the land, like any other individual. Katav alav Arosh, the Rosh says, Masha Piresh Aliba de Rav Sheshat, Velo Piresh Aliba de Rav Nachman. So he says, that which he explained, according to Rav Sheshat, it's not like Rav Nachman. Mishum de Mistaber de Lo Mechayev Lomar Nevarech, because it makes sense to say that he's not really obligated to do Nevarech, even though he's already obligated to Zimun. Dina bracha le'achid, because it's not really a blessing for an individual. The Rif says, where does he return? Oto she'u omer nevarech, that one who said nevarech. She'achalnu mishalo, right? He already mentioned the zimun. Rav Zavid says, where does he return? Choser lerosh, he goes back to the beginning. The omer nevarech, and he says nevarech. She'achalnu pam another time he says it. Wow, additional time. Wow, okay. The rabbis say no, he has to go back to where he stopped. And he says right like this, the zimun, he answers the zimun, but if one person is stopping for two people, we don't even ask, right, where is he returning? Because he paskin like Rav Nachman, she'en mafsik ki im ad nevarech, because he only stops until nevarech. Ad connection, that's the end of it. Okay, that's the end of it. So this was the Rosh. Okay. So then he moves on. Rosh ve'achar kach. All right, that was the Rosh. Ve'achar kach katav b'shem Bahag. He writes the name of the Bahag afterwards. Hecha debae lemipak, when he needs to leave the person. Right, Chad minai, one of them. Ubao chavrohi, and the other ones wanted to the me'abad and they want to accommodate him. Be nice to him, right? So what happens? Paskin sevadatayu. They stop their meal for a second, right? And he does zimun on them. Ad hazan, until zan. Gamar, and he finishes ihu bracha kula. He finishes the whole blessing. V'nafak v'chozrim v'ochlim gemurim v'gomrim sodatam. So then they go back and finish their meal. Umbarchin, and they bless. But where does he continue right from there? Where does he continue? The Bahag wasn't talking about that. Because when he explained that when we say when does he go, when does he return, where does he return? Kimo Shepirish Arif, like the Rif explained, Baruch she'achalnu mishalo. It's talking about the one who says Baruch she'achalnu mishalo. Ve'afshar de'afal gav. Shapirash the paskinan seudatayu. It's possible that even though he explained right that we stopped the seudah, we can add azan until zan. Become makom kivan she'achlu, but he says nevertheless since they ate achakach afterwards tzrichim levarech birkat azan. They have to bless the blessing of Zan. The Shalosh Brachot Deoraita Nidu. Why? Because these three blessings are from the Torah. But Birkat Zan. So it doesn't make sense to say that they're going to fully obligation of Zan. The Shlishi, when they stop for the third guy, in the middle of their meal. So he says we can rely on the Rif and the Halachot Gedolot. V'yachid amafsik l'shnayim. So therefore, the individual, right, who stops for two people, tzarich she'achazor l'tchilat birkat hazan. So he has to go back to hazan, right? In other words, he has to start birkat hamazon. Right? The outside is zimun, even though right he fulfilled the obligation of zimun, regarding that which he ate. במה שהפסיק להם מכל מקום שלוש ברכות צריך לברך. But he says, nevertheless, whatever he stopped for them, I'm sorry, מה שאכל, במה? לייצר ידי חזרו במה שאכל, מה שהפסיק להם. Right, so that, when he stopped for them, when he stopped for them. בכל מקום שלוש ברכות צריך לברך. But he says, nevertheless, you do have to do three blessings. In other words, you have to do the full Birkat Hamazon. על מה שאכל אחריהם, regarding that which he ate after them, עד כדי that's the end of it. ומשמע מדבריו, so it seems from his words, he says, comes out, שאין צריך לברך שלוש ברכות. You don't really have to do three blessings, Birkat Hamazon. אלא לפי שאכל אחר שהפסיק, he says, but, because he ate after he stopped, אבל אם לא אכל, but if he didn't eat, אחר שהפסיק after he stopped, היינו די ביילן, there was a question that we asked, להיכן הוא חוזר, where does he return? והסיקנא דאי הוא דאינו חוזר אלא ממקום שפסק. So, and the conclusion is that he goes back to the place where he stopped, דהיינו לברכת הזן, like ברכת הארץ, the second blessing of the land. Okay, good. Let's see what else we got here. So maybe we'll take a break, and we'll do the Shulchan Aruch a little bit, because this goes through the whole chapter, and it's a good idea to take a break and see the conclusions of these things. So let's take a look at it. So it says in the Shulchan Aruch, אינו צריך להפסיק אלא עד שיאמר ברוך שאכל משלו. So as we said, right, when does he, we said, just to recap, right, we said before, that if two want to leave, right, and one is staying, so what happens is that they can tell him, you know what, let's stop here, let's do zimun, and then you can continue eating afterwards. So in that scenario, now we're adding some more details, right? That he only has to stop, he says, until Baruch She'echal Mishalo. So as we said, right, until the Zimun. So what does that mean? He doesn't have to do the first blessing in the Birkat Hamazon, right? Hazan Takol. That's not necessary. So we don't paskin like Rashi, right? We go like the Rif and the Rambam. The Choser v'gomer Seudato, and then, right, what happens is that he goes back and finishes the Seudah, as we said, but all Birkat D'tchila, right, without blessing again, Hamotzi. Why? Because he's already in the middle of the meal. There's no reason for him to say now Hamotzi again. Because he didn't do Birkat Hamazon, right? So he's still in the meal. He just stopped to do Zimun, that's it. Okay, great. So then he says, ויש אומרים שצריך להפסיק עד שיאמר האזן את הכל. Some say, right, he has to stop until Hazan et Hakol, meaning what? They have to do the first blessing as well. So says, right, the Ramah, that's the custom, So it seems like the Ashkenazim, that was their custom to wait until they finish the first blessing, which is Hazan et Hakol. Okay, makes sense. So they'd go like the Rosh and Tosot. And the Bahag. Okay, great. That's great. So then Muzan, so he says, what about if his intention was to, return and eat more? Even if he didn't really eat afterwards, מתחילה ברכת הזן, וכל שכן אם חוזר ואכל. So now he's talking about what happens afterwards, right? Once they already did the zimun, and those two guys left, now he's left alone here. So if his intention is to eat more, continue the meal for himself, even though he didn't eat afterwards. So when he wants to bless, he's going to start from Azan. All the more so if he went back and ate. So what the Ramah is saying over here is that even though their custom, right, by the Ashkenazim, the custom is that when those two guys are leaving, they do Birkat Hamazon, they do Zimun, right? And also they do the first blessing, Hazan Takol. So that's the custom of the Ashkenazim. And now, right, if he wants to go back and eat more, the guy who stayed there, even though he didn't really eat afterwards, but nevertheless, right, he says, when he blesses the Birkat Hamazon afterwards, you gotta start from the beginning, right? Birkat Hamazon. So in other words, don't say, oh, well, they already read the first blessing before, so I don't have to say it again. No, you have to say it again. Why? Because you didn't do Birkat Hamazon yet. Only they did. You just did Zimun with them. That's all. Right? All the more so he says if he came back to eat, and ate more. Okay, so I'll just recap this, right? One more time. Make sure we got everything here. Little details, there's some details here. Got to make sure you get everything straight. So I'll go over the whole thing, right, from top to bottom, just right the basic halacha, So we said three people ate together, right? So if two of them want to leave and one of them wants to stay, so they can force him to stop, and do zimun. And after they do zimun, they finish Birkat Hamazon. And this guy who wants to stay can just continue his meal. This is what happens. On the other hand, if you have one person who wants to leave, they cannot force two of them to stop. Right? It's not proper manners because we go according to majority. So therefore, right, in that case, we can only, have them stop if they, they agree to be nice about it. Even though they're not obligated to do it, but they want to be nice and do it. So if that's the case, they can do it. They can stop, and they'll do zimun, and then they'll continue afterwards until they finish the meal. So then we said that even if he actually decided, right, to do the zimun, like to force them into it, it doesn't work, even if he did it, because he's the minority. On the other hand, if the two, right, who were the majority, decided to do it, and the other guy didn't really want to, but he was just sitting there, they can still force him, to do this mitzvah, and they just do it, when he's there. Then in the second part, we said that question is now, right? When they're stopping for you, when you're stopping for them, right? You're the minority. You're stopping. So until where do you have to go with them, right? So according to the first opinion, according to Shulchan Aruch, we said you got to go until Nevarech, and that's it, until the Zimun finished. But, right, that's the halacha according to Shulchan Aruch. But then comes Rama and brings the custom of the Ashkenazim, and there, by them, the custom is that they gotta wait for him until he finishes the first blessing, or they finish the first blessing, right? And that's a custom, he says, by us. And if his intention was to return, so then he'll have to do the whole Birkat Hamazon again, right at the end, when he finishes his meal. Okay, great. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I guess we'll stop here, and we'll finish it tomorrow. Okay, so thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Chazak Baruch, Laila Tov. We'll see you tomorrow. God bless.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All the best.
Kavod Harav, thank you so much.
All the best. God bless.
Thank you.